Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Near Memo with me and Mike Blumenthal here as always. And today we don't have any exciting special guests, but we are our own guests today, as we'll be talking about a whole bunch of stuff that is exciting and special in and of itself. How are you doing, Mike? How are you feeling? Good. It's very, very busy at Near Media. We're doing a lot of things and we're involved in an exciting legal case that we can't really talk about right now that involves review fraud. And so we're learning a lot of interesting things from that. But let's jump into today's items, which are going to be the replacement of GBP content with AI, scraped, crawled, compiled material. We're also going to talk about a study from Ayeda Solis, who found that it was really ads that were more responsible for the siphoning off of clicks than AI overviews, which is something we found in our research. And then we're going to go into a kind of an extended review segment that combines a number of things, some new Yelp data, some Google crawling prohibitions, and the BrightLocal consumer review survey that they just released last week for 2026 has some interesting findings there. So, Mike, why don't you get started on the screen that you got
Sure.
right here?
So yesterday, Joy highlighted this new test that Google is doing. I checked it and found this test on some of my locations. It's on mobile. I only see it on Safari on mobile on my iPhone. And on a brand search, what happens is Google is integrating AI content into the knowledge graph output. So the first thing you see is a summary of the business, what they do, where they are. When you click into show more, you see a brief description of services and key features. You see that they use the website heavily to get that. Even this one, which highlights their Better Business Bureau membership, is from their website. And almost all of these, except this one, the last one, so 1 out of 7 are from the website. When equally, or maybe perhaps more interesting to me, is the fact that some of the structured data that businesses put into GBP in this test is being replaced by AI. So for example, services, which in this case, the business would have entered extensively, are being replaced with services from the website. So the list is, interestingly, not as complete as the list they had created and entered. Summarized here. And again, most of these links, when you go in to look at them, are from the website. I don't know where, oh, there it is down at the bottom, from their very own website. So, and then the rest of the information shows up here. So a couple things about this. One is, Google has historically had trouble getting businesses to update their profile. And historically, whenever they've had an opportunity to automate acquisition of data to the exclusion of the business, they have done so. So this is very consistent with that desire to show more data across all listings more or less equally. Although it does this, it penalizes the people who have verified and updated their listing. And because it's AI, has the chance of getting it wrong. So it's an interesting test. It's also quite verbose. I mean, I don't know
Yes.
how users
Yeah.
would respond to it. So as opposed to the clean, simple, here's your brand thing, reviews, phone number, etc. There's all of this blah, 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 blah stuff. So I just find it fascinating. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, so interestingly, for the people who can't see this, who may be listening to this without the benefit of the video, it's just a very lengthy, dense presentation of, as Mike said, what was previously structured data in many cases. It's all expandable. It doesn't show up this way. So you click through and it expands. There's from surveys that I've done and also from third-party studies that show that the number of GBPs that have been claimed by small businesses, at least, is something like 35%, which is a BrightLocal number, to approaching 45%, which is a number I got from a small business survey, but that included much larger businesses. So it went beyond traditional small businesses into the realm of, a couple of hundred, 300 employees. So the number of businesses that have claimed their GBP is probably around 40%. And I would imagine that Google is responding to that in some sense with this. And they're also trying to do what they think is improving the consumer experience. I think it kind of, to use the colloquial expression, blows. I don't want to see all of this text, when I'm looking for simple information. I mean, what people do is they go to ChatGPT, or they're going to Gemini or Claude or whatever. They're doing their informational investigation, and then they're going to Google to get clean answers to certain questions, reviews, location information, directions, whatever. I don't want to see all of this. I don't want to see all of this.
So there's two other aspects to this that I think are interesting. One is it is a subtle sales pitch for Google's AI, the icons in front of the services and
it's another
highlight
way to bring you into their AI universe.
And there are two calls to action: dive deeper into AI mode right at the top, and at the bottom below all the other details, there's a, ask something about this business, right? So you can,
and that's going to be AI probably.
That is AI. That's their AI feature that they rolled out in Maps almost a year ago.
Ask something about this. I thought it was like a PAA. No,
it's like a PAA.
Right.
Learn something specific, but it's ask about this business, right?
See, they would be much better off with the existing structured data. I mean, they have to do something for the people that haven't claimed their profiles, but they would be much better off getting rid of all this crap and just having ask about this business that rolls up a lot of the same information and letting people ask their questions.
And then when you click into AI mode, there's a new summary of core services, but interestingly, the basic GBP information is still there: calls, directions, click the website. The overarching description is shorter, and they detail core services, key business details,
this
and
is
reputation.
This is kind of better than what we saw just a minute ago with the first level of the knowledge.
Right. And then there's a call to action inside AI mode. Would you like to schedule a free estimate? In there, I don't know what happens or where you say yes to that. There's no field for input that I can see.
Yeah. I mean, there'll be some paid, they'll monetize this somehow.
So there you have it.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, and Google is experimenting, obviously, trying to integrate the experiences, but it's just kind of too much, I think, from a UI standpoint.
Well, I guess when you have potatoes, as my father used to say, you make potato soup.
Exactly. So roughly last week,
last Sunday, I think it was.
Maybe it was last Sunday. Aida Solis put out a study that she had done using similar web data, where she looked at the different SERP features and click share by feature across thousands of queries in 4 product categories. So this is not local search. This is not local services or services in general, but it's products. And she was testing the proposition that's widely been discussed and embraced by CEOs and marketers, that AIOs are killing clicks. And Google has always disputed that proposition, saying, the methodologies of these studies are flawed. What our research has shown, our internal user testing and behavioral research that we
and this is where we put 300 people on a screen with a suggestion of what they're looking for, and we let them do the search. We track all that and watch what they do and watch when and how Google shows AI. So it's a very
where they click. Yeah, where they click, and we capture all that data.
So to Google, my message to Google on this, our methodology is sound.
Yes. Okay. It is sound, because I'm involved in watching all the videos, which can be at times quite tedious, but interesting nonetheless. And what we found is that people do engage, and this is also backed up by our survey data. People like the AI component of the results. They like AI overviews. They look at them. Not everybody engages with them. Not everybody expands them, but generally they have a positive view of them and see them as helpful. But they're not taking clicks away. They don't take clicks away from, at least in a local context, the ultimate choices. There's a lot of zero click behavior going on, obviously, because GBP, as we just discussed, has got such complete information and all the reviews are there and images and so on and so forth. So there's that. But really what's going on is that ads, in her study, it's Google shopping ads that are capturing a lot of the clicks, and the AIOs are not siphoning them off. In our case, it's ads, but it's in particular it's LSAs, local services ads, that are like a black hole when they appear, because people go right for them, they engage with them, they click through, and very often they make a choice right from that list of businesses, and they don't go back into an organic set of search results.
And what we
So
see with AI overviews in this context is, one, that like you said, people like them, but two, that they help people get a sense that they're in the right place. They sort of summarize what they were looking for, and it allows them to evaluate that they made the right query. And then if they do see a brand in AIO, like a local listing, historically they haven't clicked on it, but that seemed to influence a later choice. It
yes,
reinforced that brand, much like offline advertising does in terms of their willingness to choose that brand.
right.
So
It's a
it does influence outcome.
kind of like instant awareness boost that, as you say, that in a subsequent session for the same searcher, they tend to respond to if they see that name come up again. And awareness is kind of a big deal. I mean, in our research, if you have some sort of prior awareness, it does help pretty dramatically, and AIOs kind of play into that, as
And
you
in
say.
local, as Joy has been pointing out, very aggressive, Joy Hawkins, very aggressively for the last 3 months. Virtually the top 5, 6 places are paid. There's LSAs, there's PPC, there's the top of the
Map
map
ads.
ads. And
Yep.
now the PPC with local assets are beginning to look like local listings, right? So there could be LSA local listings, PPC local listings, and then map local listings, all of which are paid. So there's where for all of you agencies that are focusing on organic, that's where your clicks are going. It's unfortunately, if you're not doing PPC and LSAs, you're probably, need to reappraise your activity as an agency.
Right, and this is all part of Google's effort to kind of muddy the waters around what's an organic listing and what's an ad. And even though these are labeled, just the way that everything is laid out and the way that it's integrated into the experience is desensitizing people to ads. And
And it's a way
yeah,
for them to fund their various AI
AI.
extravaganzas of building data centers and power plants and all of that sort of stuff. I mean, it's cash flow. The more cash flow they have, the more competitive they are against the likes of ChatGPT, who needs to raise every penny by begging for it.
Right. And Google is in a position where they can extract these economic rents from businesses because they still retain this, substantially retain this monopoly, even though we'll talk a little bit about some slight shifts that are going on in the market. And if you are a service business in one of the categories where local services ads exist and you decline to participate, you are losing a meaningful number of clicks and potentially customers. And Google is kind of forcing that on you. It's a kind of a coercive situation where you increasingly have to pay to play, and there's nothing anybody's doing about it. I mean, the antitrust cases kind of came and went without, at least on the consumer side. I mean, the search advertising and all of that, without really any consequences for Google. The ad tech stuff is still remains to be seen, and the Europeans are still doing stuff. But
This segues into our second segment very well, which is that last week there was under the radar, all of a sudden everybody who was scraping Google reviews was having trouble because Google started hiding review counts and reviews to some extent on maps. And this forced SerpAPI to have a disruption of service. SerpAPI, as you remember, Google sued them several months ago for illegally scraped content, violating terms of service, and they've taken them to court. And SerpAPI is the company that is most used by ChatGPT and Perplexity to provide grounded web results. So Google, basically changed up maps. Several review companies reached out to me, told me they're having trouble, but they thought they could fix it. And then I heard from several people, several sources, that Yext was looking for a new scrape review supplier for their chain. And then there was an article in 9 to 5 Google that reported on this issue and noted that Google put up a pop-up that said, if you're experiencing these issues, it's because unusual traffic is detected on our network and Google is creating some blocks. And when I talked to technicians about this, apparently Google's been rotating IP addresses and API starting points, which is how people were getting this information. The issue went away to some extent after the 20th, but it's part and parcel of Google's efforts to constrain the unique data they have, make it less available to the ChatGPTs of the world. So not only are they going to outspend ChatGPT, they're going to use their data differential to create another advantage and
retain the advantage, right?
Retain the advantage, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean,
they're playing hardball.
There's more than a little hypocrisy here. I mean, plenty of companies say you can't scrape our website. I mean, there was a big case involving LinkedIn. Scraping by itself is not illegal or not prohibited, but the companies can prohibit it through their terms and use that as a basis to prevent somebody from scraping their data. But Google is a scraper. Google gets all of its content, with the exception of the GBP stuff and the merchant feeds, from scraping, and that's what its AI is based upon. There have been many objections to the compulsory submission of content to the training machine. It was like what Google was doing years ago, where if we take you out of this one part that's objectionable, we're going to have to de-index you, right? So Google has maintained a position that, your content is free for us to use for training, or we can take you out of the entire index, which is a kind of an aggressive abuse of position kind of statement. And in Europe, they are going to break that. I think there's going to be Google is going to be forced to allow people to opt out of AI overviews or AI mode and still stay in the index. But one of the things also that Dan Petrovic pointed out on LinkedIn is that if consumers, even at the highest tier of paid usage on Google Gemini, if consumers want to retain any memory of their previous chats, which is one of the benefits of using these tools, they have to allow the AI to train on all their content, their history, and the content that they're submitting. And if you block that, then you lose the benefit of the kind of context window in the memory.
Which speaks to not only their control, it speaks to the reality that going forward, every search result is either going to be personalized, it's going to be personalized, localized, and randomized by AI, meaning that there is no longer a static search result for people, right? Which puts rank trackers at risk. It puts, all the historical behaviors at risk that we've used as benchmarks for making assessments on how to do marketing.
Yeah, it'll all be probabilistic going forward,
Right, exactly.
So, in a related item, talk a little bit about the Yelp Trust and Safety report.
So every year Yelp releases their trust and safety report looking back on the year. This year, the average Yelp review had 446 characters compared to last year where it was 447 characters, and the year before 471 characters. So it's been roughly the same for a number of years. Says that only 2% of Yelp reviews have fewer than 100 characters, whereas 50% of Google reviews are less. So
yes, the joke's on them because people don't read that content for the most part.
Yeah, and they don't write them either. They had a sum total of reviews of 22 million. This compares to Google's 900 million that's last reported, 900 some, almost a billion. And of these 22 million, only 70% made it through their filters. So that was at 15 million made it through their filters. 17% weren't recommended. 11% were removed by Yelp's user operation team. And they note that they filtered out nearly 500,000 suspected AI generated reviews. And the leading reason for that were for reviews being removed beyond them being suspected of AI. 25% didn't reflect. There were 200,000 that were reviewed and removed by their operation team, not the 500,000 removed algorithmically. Those were removed because they weren't first-hand experiences. There was a conflict of interest. They were left on the wrong business, inappropriate content, i.e. swearing, etc. So 200,000 were removed for policy violations. What's interesting, there's this, it's almost a footnote here, which is interesting, that they were tackling airline customer support scams. I don't know if you remember, we reported on it in August 2024. There was a surge in travel scams, and Yelp systems removed more than 889,000 fake phone support accounts, which was the driver behind their increase in account closures. So it wasn't just Google that was experiencing this, it was Yelp. And then another 500 reviews came down due to incentives, etc. So interesting. No news here is that Yelp is now a small player in a very big pond.
Well, I have two reactions to that. One is the degree to which there's just a continuous assault on the integrity of these review systems. There's just so much fraud and so many scams going on. You know, there was a piece that I saw in passing maybe this morning, or maybe it was last night. The days and nights bleed into one another. Where somebody was saying in Europe and in the UK, as many as like a third, I may be misquoting this, some very high percentage of ads on Meta led to scams, malware, scams. You know, they were just not legit. And this is part of a broader conversation, which we can have at another time, about the erosion of trust, the rise of scams and fraud, the erosion of trust that's going on across the board. And this sort of plays into, to some degree, the BrightLocal study that came out last week, their 2026, now their 8th consumer review study. And there are hints in that people, that people are kind of between a rock and a hard place with reviews, because reviews are kind of the number one tool. They are the number one tool that people use to help choose local businesses or choose businesses in general, and products for that matter. And they don't really have a way to penetrate the fraud. I mean, certain kinds of fraud are pretty self-evident, but because most people look at review counts and star ratings and don't read the text of reviews in depth, it's a minority of people that do that. It's harder for them to tell something is fraudulent. And I think we talked about this in a previous session, where you've got increasingly an abstraction layer. You know, ask Maps about this place, or Rufus on Amazon, where reviews are becoming data for some other type of user experience. And you know, I don't look at Amazon reviews. I just go to Rufus and I say, tell me what the biggest complaint about this product is, or whatever. And I'm not looking at the reviews. And so when you have those kinds of experiences, it's harder and harder to tell. The fraud gets buried under the number of reviews and the star rating aggregate count, or the abstraction layer. And what the BrightLocal survey reflected was continuing reliance on Google as the main review source for local business recommendations, even though between this year and last year, it slipped by 12 points. In other words, it's number one, but it declined somewhat. And they also exposed that people are using more sources, often looking at Google or looking at their preferred review site, and then going on to other things to confirm that, which is kind of interesting behavior, because they don't really have any other way to determine what's legit and what's not legit. And then there was a lot of anger, it seemed to me, and this may be the first time they've asked this question. There was a lot of anger that the survey discovered about review fraud, and people were demanding, pretty strong punishments for fraud. They thought that the platforms, meaning Google and Facebook and Yelp, should be the ones responsible for enforcing it, which they are as a practical matter, but which they don't have any legal accountability for. And then they blamed others, the business, the consumer, whatever, after that. But the penalties that they were demanding, in kind of rank order, were being banned from the review platform. So if you're just found, defrauding people, manipulating reviews, you should be out. You should sustain significant reputational damage. You should be de-indexed from Google entirely, financial penalties, losing a business license. And then 16% of these respondents wanted people to face criminal charges or prison, which I thought was really an interesting kind of reflection of the frustration that people feel and the intensity.
Where we would have a problem because our court system all of a sudden would not have any lawyers to represent us. They'd all
Because
be
they're
thrown
all,
in jail.
yeah,
They're defrauding review systems.
by implication, you bring up another of the findings, which is, and we've seen this in our own data, there's an increasing, there's review inflation, which is partially about fraud, and there's an expectation or desire for more reviews, higher star ratings. And what we've seen in the legal field is that unless you're really at the very top, above 4.5, above 4.6, above 4.7, you're not going to be considered in a lot of these cases. And some of this is driven by fraud, by manipulation. I mean, you see attorneys or, companies with 1,000 5-star reviews. That's just simply not possible. I mean, Google has done more to crack down on this in the last couple of years, but it's still pretty prevalent. And so,
And they've done some things to encourage it. For example, in legal LSAs, where a lawyer is allowed to represent themselves as doing business in the whole state, the lawyer can then pick their location with the highest reviews. So even when you're looking in Buffalo, New York, you might see a lawyer from New York City with 1,000 reviews, where the rest of Buffalo, New York has only 300 reviews or whatever. So Google is precipitating this requirement of escalating review activity and higher volumes. And then the other thing that we're seeing is that deprecates the value reviews. If all of them have 600, 700 reviews at 4 now, people have to make a choice based on something else. And we see them doing that. They'll read negative reviews. They'll go to Yelp and look at reviews, or they'll use other mnemonics like years in business or the feeling they get from their photographs, those sorts of things. So all of a sudden reviews become useless, which is the bigger danger, that between fraud and inflation, even if real, they become a meaningless metric by which to judge a business.
but it's also kind of unfair to ethical businesses who are trying to do this the right way, who don't have the same volume, who can't match the velocity, because they might have good reviews, but they have so many fewer reviews that they just don't show up. They're not showing up at the pack. They're not showing up in LSAs. And the only kind of defense against that really is to build your local reputation, to create prior awareness, to make people search for you directly, to make you a word of mouth referral. So somebody who has a lower review count can win versus an inflated profile if somebody knows your name, because they're scanning the undifferentiated listings and they see something they recognize, like where you're talking about with the AI overviews. Oh, I know Mike Blumenthal, attorney at law. Let me check him out. Right. Exactly.
That was Mike. For those of you listening, that was Mike making a scary face because Mike has PTSD from when his father wanted him to be a lawyer and he dropped out of college instead.
Well, I did
Because
become
when
a
I
lawyer.
looked around, every lawyer I saw was part of a system that I didn't want to be a part of.
Well, I did become a lawyer, and for 10 years, I was miserable. It was a very miserable experience. Although I am grateful for some of the things that I learned, which do come in handy from time to time. And I made some good friends in law school. But we're in an interesting place with reviews because they continue to be the central tool that people have to use to make, the internet is the most used way to find local business referrals. Reviews are the dominant tool that people use, but at the same time there's growing skepticism about them, and there's a desire to, and there's a trust, there's a broader trust issue on the internet in general. And so there's a kind of a difficult tension between, I'm looking at all these reviews, I'm having difficulty differentiating these businesses, and I don't kind of know if I can trust what I'm looking at. And this is where Yelp comes back into play. Yelp has the differential in the volume of reviews, I don't think matters as much anymore. I mean, I think people default to Google because they expect to find what they're looking for on Google, sort of like you expect to find the products that you're looking for on Amazon. I'm I'm not a Yelp partisan, but Yelp has failed to exploit its opportunity. I mean, they've tried to do this, but they haven't done it successfully by emphasizing trust. If I've got 10,000 questionable reviews, 150 or 200 vetted, high quality, trustworthy reviews is going to be a lot better. I don't need, this is like the search index debate. I don't, I don't need to see a million results. I just want to see, 10 or 15 high quality results that address my issue. And that's why I think as many people are engaging with AI. And to that point, BrightLocal found that AI has gone from being the number three, sorry, not the number three, a lower source of local business recommendations to the number three source today. This is not a source of reviews necessarily. This is where people are going to get local business information. And let me see if I can find it now as I'm scrolling.
Its generative AI tools has become the third most popular source. It was 6%. It's now 45%.
Right.
I would question though, I mean, not question. They say ChatGPT or other generative AI tools,
Which includes Google.
which includes Google, which means that,
Yeah.
and
So that,
the other
yeah.
aspect to that is since it includes Google, Google includes primarily their reviews, but they, when asked, will include reviews from Yelp and TripAdvisor and all the other platforms. So as ChatGPT does, so
It's a little murky. It's a little murky because of what Google is doing. Is that Gemini? Is that AI mode? Is that AI overviews in AI mode and Gemini? Or is that some other thing that's going on? It's a little bit murky, but I think we don't know exactly what's going to happen. I mean, Google is, it's probably going to be able to successfully pull a lot of ChatGPT users back into Google with its improving Gemini experience, and the combination of Google's data advantages, inertia, and improving Gemini will probably mean that Google wins. That doesn't mean that ChatGPT goes away or that there aren't, two or three of these guys out there. But in terms of local, it probably means that Google wins. But the thing that people and I prefer about the AI experience in many of these cases is that, it's just much cleaner and more direct, notwithstanding the verbosity, the dense, too many words kind of phenomenon that you get, that we talked about at the top of the.
Yeah, it's just interesting looking at the top sites for reviews from their survey. Google, as you noted, was down 12%. Facebook was flat. Yelp was flat. YouTube was up 8%. Instagram was up 6%. ChatGPT was up 30%. TripAdvisor was up 10%, 8%. TikTok was up 9%. Local news was down 12% or something. Apple Maps was up 13%. So, and Reddit was up 6%. I mean, on the surface, this seems to do two things. One, it seems believable to me just on its face. And two, it reflects what Google and ChatGPT are highlighting, other than Apple Maps, are highlighting in the sources. So some of this could be due to the reinforcement that users are getting from ChatGPT and from Google AI mode and AI overviews. TBD, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, I think here, what this, I mean, you can't see the chart we're looking at, but what the chart shows is,
I can show it.
20, yeah, okay, 20 different 20 different sources approximately that people are using. And this goes to using multiple, right, there it is, using multiple sources as validation, confirming, right? I get a referral over here. I'm going to confirm it over there. What a lot of people do when they do a local search on ChatGPT is then they go to traditional Google to confirm it or to look at the reviews or whatever. It looks like people are using other things, video in particular, but other things as well, to confirm, there's like a sequencing thing here. Where am I going first? Where am I going to confirm the result? And that's how people are coping with the rise of fake information, uncertainty around the trustworthiness of the information that they're
And
saying.
I would
think
suggest it
it's
may
very
be
interesting.
demographically defined. Like my son is
Definitely,
going to go to YouTube more than I
definitely.
am as for
And
definitive
TikTok,
sources, and
right?
TikTok more
TikTok,
than I am. Yeah. Well,
right. I
even
mean,
the generation below him is TikTok. He's YouTube, but so
and what's the generation below that?
diapers. I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of category specific behavior too. I mean, somebody looking for information on products versus a doctor versus a restaurant. I think there's that we would see if this was segmented by those industries, we would see a lot of differences there, I suspect.
But it reinforces from a strategic level being on a diverse source of review sites that are relevant to your industry. If you can get highlighted in critic reviews, authoritative sources, Reddit or critic in the restaurant industry in your local news, those sorts of things. I mean, those tactics at a broad strategic sense haven't changed, I think. But I think it is clear that a diversity of sources beyond Google is important from a tactical point of view.
Right. And don't do anything that looks like review fraud, because you're going to get punished by the platforms if you get caught, and consumers will never
And
trust you again.
they'll throw you in jail.
Yeah. Review jail, not real jail. All right. I think that brings our time this week to a close. And thanks everybody for watching or listening, and be sure and tell your friends. We'll be back with more special guests in coming episodes. And look for the inaugural issue of our legal newsletter, which is overdue because I'm too busy, but that's coming out very shortly. And if you want to subscribe to that, you can sign up on the website. And the rest of you, have a good week.